Hello, everybody, and welcome to Atheist Sunday School, your one-stop shop for everything Atheist, Sunday, and school. And boy, do we have a show for you today. Today we are covering Amos chapters 1 through 4.
Is it Amos or Amos?
I say Amos, but it could be Amos. I don't know.
With Landon Noll.
With Landon Noll.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on your time zone and latitude. And hello from your friendly secular astronomer. And he has risen. See?
Yes, he is risen. Landon has our newest shirt there with Buzzy B on it. It looks great.
Helium is risen. Helium rises, except if it's in a medium which is less dense than helium, then of course it'll sink.
Yo, yes. What if it's a liquid or solid?
See,
well, I mean, if you liquefy helium versus gaseous thing, but helium liquefies really cold, so
yep,
it's a complex thing. So yes, so one thing like you say is the book of Amos, right? It's like CMOS, DMOS. This is Amos.
Yeah. This is the first one. Yeah.
Yep.
So there's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about with Amos. So first of all, it could very easily just be the oldest book of the Bible. Not Job, don't you dare say it. So this could very easily be the first one. It's usually between this and Hosea.
But what books are we using to discuss this?
Yeah, so for this, I do have a couple commentaries here.
Well, I have the King James Version of the Bible.
I have the English Standard Version of the Bible. It's over here.
We also have Robert Alter's translation and commentary of the Hebrew Bible.
And we have the Holy Scriptures according to some Jews and the New King James Version of the Bible.
And we have Eerdman's commentary on the Bible with commentary on Amos by M. Daniel Carroll R.
And we also, yes, Matthew, that is true. It's perfect shirt for Easter. We have a commentary from the Evangelical Exegetical Commentary series on Amos, Jonah, and Micah by Joanna M. Hoyt.
Which we'll also use for Jonah and Micah.
Obviously, yeah. And we have the commentary and translation from the Hermenia series from Hans Walter Wolff on Joel and Amos.
Yes, and we have other books that we won't be using.
We're not going to need those other
But
books.
we do have the Old Testament survey.
Trust me, we're not going to need that one.
You don't know.
We're not. I so first of all, so last night I read through the introduction for Amos in Joanna M. Hoyt's book, and when I got here, I read through a good chunk of the introduction on Amos in Wolff, or at least the stuff that wasn't well covered in Hoyt.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like the biggest debate on this book is about the compositional history. So someone like Wolff, he has you have this earliest layer that's from Amos, and then you have a school of Amos, basically like his disciples and whatnot, where they added a little bit of stuff afterwards, like maybe like a generation afterwards, and then you have during the Assyrian period, you would have another redaction, and then you have a Deuteronomistic one before the exile, and then one after the exile. So he separates it that way. And I'm going to talk a little bit about his arguments for that. However, I do. So after reading Hoyt's commentary, there is some good stuff in there, but she's like, there are scholars who would say that this has been divided up into, so many redactional periods and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But she's like, more conservative scholars don't take that, so she is a more conservative scholar who has like this original stratum with just a few later additions.
Yeah, well, this commentary, it's not really a commentary, it's just an introduction here by Donald E. Gowan. It goes over a few things of note. First of all, we know nothing about some of the prophets here except for their names or their name and place of residence. Only the book of Jeremiah contains a lengthy series of stories about the life of a prophet. As for Amos, book tells us that he came from Tekoa in Judah, and that was somehow associated with shepherds, and that he had been a herdsman and a trimmer of sycamore trees.
Something on that actually.
Yeah.
So the title that's used, so it calls him a shepherds, or he was one among the shepherds. It seems like that's not because that's not the word that's usually used for shepherds.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like a more proper translation would be one where he's like looking over shepherds. So he's like not necessarily like an elite, but he is he does more than just a shepherd. He's like a manager of shepherds, something like that.
Shepherd.
Yeah, there's a little more here. I'm just skipping from section to section. I'm not going to read everything in here.
Yeah, I have some.
But the superscription of the book dates it during the reigns of Uzziah, king of Judah, and Jeroboam II, king of Israel.
Yeah.
And the only part of the book that seems to refer to a different period is in chapter 9, though some scholars have dated that section in the 8th century BCE also. It says here that it's usually dated between 760 and 750 BCE after Jeroboam's military successes in Gilead, and before the rise of Tiglath-Pileser III made the Assyrian threat obvious.
Yeah, so a little bit more on that. So because of the time that it is placed in, you have Uzziah, and which, by the way, Wolf thinks the Uzziah thing is a later addition for some reason. And I honestly, I read through his argument and it was honestly kind of wanting. But either way, so he prophesied during the reigns of Uzziah, that's 767 to 740 BC, and in the south, and Jeroboam, son of Joash, that is Jeroboam II, 782 to 753 BCE in the north. Since Amos identifies only these two kings, the dates likely do not include their co-regencies with their preceding rulers. This places his prophecies between 767 and 753. The date of his prophecies are further limited by the last clause of 1:1, 2 years before the earthquake. The mention of an earthquake as an identifying chronological event is puzzling, as there were several earthquakes in that region. A fissure called the Jordan Rift runs from Turkey down to Africa. This rift is the source of earthquakes in Israel, and there has been some investigating into this, and it seems like there was an earthquake during this time period, around 760, I think. So that gives us an even better date. And it looks like one of the later editions. So let me get to this. That the earthquake is referred to with the definite article signals that it was a particularly memorable one. Zechariah 14:5 refers to the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, which is likely the same earthquake Amos references. Archaeologists at Hazor have identified signs of a major earthquake, which dates to around 760 BCE during the reign of Uzziah. It is possible that what made the earthquake memorable was its appearance in conjunction with another major event, such as a solar eclipse, which that's 8:7 through 9, which was considered a bad omen in the ancient Near East. Assyrian records document a solar eclipse in 763 BCE, which would fit with the latter half of Jeroboam II's reign and is close enough with the proposed dating of the earthquake at Hazor that they potentially could have occurred. Well, they say occurred at the same time. I don't think so. What I'm guessing is that maybe the introduction was even written later. So you would have this thing that mentions the earthquake, the thing that mentions, or at least alludes to a solar eclipse, and then mentions the earthquake in a later period, like it gets added to it later. But I think the timing of that it does work out. It's fine. I have no issue with the dating of this. So whether or not he personally wrote anything, that's unknown. But he could have easily written it, or he could have had a school for it. I think having scribes for him to orate to would make sense. Mm-hmm. So this would be before the Assyrian invasion, and there are a lot of. So I'm gonna read a little bit about the the focus of this book here in the time period. So the reign of Jeroboam II, it was a time of great prosperity. They were doing great. They were able to take over nations and stuff. Now they viewed it as a blessing, but Amos did not view that as a blessing. And of course, when we go to the Deuteronomistic history, that of course was also not a blessing. It was like, in spite of their sin, it was like, in spite of their sin, God still gives them all this stuff. So it's not exactly a blessing is his view of it. So surprisingly, despite their continually breaking the Mosaic covenant, the northern kingdom prospered during Jeroboam II's reign. Prior to his reign, much of the territory that belonged to the United Kingdom under David and Solomon had been lost. During this period, though, their borders were enlarged. The territory of the northern kingdom stretched from Hamath in the north to the Sea of the Arabah, that is the Dead Sea, in the south. Politically and economically, the northern kingdom was very prosperous. Yeah. So then the major focus of Amos concerns the worship of the northern kingdom. Outside Amos, we read that Jeroboam II continued in the path of the sins. So we talked about this before with the golden calves that were set up, right? So one of the things that's noted here is I think there might be one reference to Dan in this book, although he talks about the sins of Bethel a lot. When going over the reading, it didn't there are certainly a lot of references to Dan in the commentaries because they related to Jeroboam's reign and the golden calves that were set up, which I think is a fine setting for it. However, it doesn't seem like that was too much of an issue for Dan, and that's also another reason why some scholars believe that the Dan part was added later. That there wasn't one set up there, but either way. So there are some very interesting textual issues as well. Intertextual issues, I should say. And while most of it doesn't pose too much of an issue, aside from words that we don't quite know what they mean.
That's always great reading translations.
Yeah, isn't it? There are some really interesting comparisons that can be made with especially the book of Joel. So in regard to Joel, 2 verses in Amos share similarities with 2 verses in Joel. Amos 1:2 and Joel 4:16, and Amos 9:13 and Joel 4:18. Now I think these are too close to be a coincidence. So, and this is from Amos, and he said, Yahweh roars from Zion, and from Jerusalem he gives his voice. And then comparing it to Joel, Yahweh roars from Zion, and from Jerusalem he gives his voice.
Wait, that's the same.
That is exactly the same, yes.
Wait, that's the same. There you go.
That's not a coincidence.
Yeah, right.
Someone's quoting someone else.
I think so, yeah.
Or maybe it's like a common saying that
it's
was
not,
present
though.
at the... how would you know?
Well, the fact that we have no... it is very rare to have Yahweh roaring in general, but then from Jerusalem is a whole other thing. Like he's spoken from Jerusalem and stuff, but roaring from Zion, from Jerusalem, he gives his voice. It's a very, very specific.
Yeah, I'll admit it's pretty hard to state that would be a just style at the time thing.
Yeah, I don't think this one's style at the time.
I mean, it's entirely possible. There's, vocal memes now that don't appear in printed books anywhere. Then if it weren't for the internet, people would just assume that any appearance would be unique to a book, right? If it were printed in a book, I don't know, okay boomer, right? You don't see a lot of books with okay boomer printed in it, but if you did, 1,000 years from now, someone reading a book might be like, wow, this is a very unique thing that only appears in this book, right?
Well, the thing about the ancient world is there wasn't an internet back then.
Right.
And you kind of have to go off of what you have. So, I do think this one is too specific. There's also another one which might give credence to one borrowing from another, probably Joel from Amos.
The question again is back again. What is the date at which they think the text was written versus the date which it's referring to, right?
Well,
the text is written around.
If we're talking about if we're talking about an original stratum, it would have been written probably slightly after the actual time that Amos was prophesying, or because there are a lot of because there are sometimes it goes from first person to third person, stuff like that. And I think that that's an argument in favor of Wolf's interpretation that there were different redactional periods. I would say that you can have an original stratum that would have been written or at least orated by Amos, and that would have been around the time of, what do we say, around 760?
Yeah, roundabout.
Yeah, around 760 BCE. And then maybe some stuff was added later to that, and I think it probably was. Probably not as much as Wolf thinks, because it does seem like he has a lot of different periods for it, but we'll talk about his arguments for that.
So in addition to those things that are shared with Joel, there's other themes of the book. What's noted in this Old Testament survey is that it deals a lot with the destructive activity of God, a lot of war stuff, except for 9:11 through 15, God's positive activity on Israel's behalf is confined to references of the past, to temporary reprieves, and to a highly conditional partial promise of graciousness. Right. Another theme is on Israel's threat of being exiled. It had been threatened before, but there's no clear evidence that anyone prior to Amos spoke explicitly of the possibility that the Israelites might lose the promised land. It's doubtful that Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28 through 29 can be dated earlier than Amos.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that is something that might have been introduced by Amos or around Amos's time. Other things is that when dealing with the nations, the book makes no effort to explain why the nations are responsible to the God of Israel for their actions. Several proposals for the theology are noted in commentaries, but
yeah, I think
not here.
So just a few last words here on the.
There's also some hymn fragments
Yeah.
and some ramblings about the future, but it's not really set in stone with Amos. There's still discussion going on about the possibility of averting doom and integrating promises that occur in chapter 9 with the negative messages in the book.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of see that throughout the Bible, though.
Mm-hmm.
You have these themes of hope, but they're right alongside these themes of destruction. So before hopping into the kind of the formation of the book, because this is the thing that I really want to talk about. I thought there was a lot to be discussed here. If you want to just read this section.
Yeah.
So before you're doing that, on the item you said in terms of that there's associated with an eclipse. Around there was one. Well, there was a total solar eclipse at 769 BCE.
769 BCE. Okay.
That path. Well, and so what dates are there's another ones as well, but that path went up into Turkey, the border of Turkey, Syria, above Lebanon, even though it would have been fairly deep at Jerusalem. You said 769. The other one you said was around, so somewhere around, you said around 760 BCE, or?
For the eclipse, so the commentaries did point out that it was in 763.
Well, there's a 760. There was a total in 764.
Okay.
That was but that one, the path was kind of outside the path. 762 had another total solar eclipse. So that path is more likely. That path, again, the one I'm referring to, the 762 BCE on June 15th, that's the one where it would have been fairly deep in Jerusalem. And again, it's like northern Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, going through that region.
Okay. Man, I'm glad we have Landon here.
So if you're talking about that region there, where you're talking about, in the area of Babylon, that sort of area region there would have been a major eclipse, and probably most likely the 762 June 15th BCE. It was about a 5-minute eclipse. So
wait, hold on. Okay. So there was an earthquake in Uzziah's time, right? And I think that was dated to what, 760? Is that what we said?
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
this was 2 years later.
Right. So, oh my God, what if he was writing at the time of? That was 2 years later. Never mind. So it would be the opposite. Never mind.
No, it was a 764. There was because you said that earthquake was, they think it's around 760, but I don't know how precise that quake is. There was an annular eclipse, but annular eclipses are where it's almost total, but it's a ring. So that was around 757.
Yeah, I mean,
there's another total around 755 as well.
So 2 years. So it's dated as 2 years. Okay, so 2 years before the earthquake. Is when it
before. So that would have been 762. The eclipse was 2 years before the earthquake, which was 760.
Mm. Oh, okay. Right. That's interesting.
Right. So 762 June 15 BCE, 5-minute total solar eclipse. That where the path of totality, while the path of totality goes up over the center line, you'd have want to been up in northern Lebanon, the border of Syria, Turkey, the modern day Turkey, of course. The whole region would have had a deep solar. When people talk about an eclipse, very rarely are they saying they're in the path of totality. They're usually saying that the sun was blocked. So in the case of something like Syria, like Jerusalem, it would have been about 85% covered. So people would have definitely noticed, the.
So Amos would have been. So Amos would have been writing, probably directly after this eclipse.
Well, what is
that? That was probably the thing that Amos was responding to in life. He saw this eclipse and he was like, "Oh shit, that's the omen," and then he starts prophesying. So that's why you have this in this superscription that he started doing it 2 years before the earthquake. Mm-hmm. We solved it, guys.
There you go.
We solved it.
Nice.
Well, what does the manuscript evidence point toward? It's for the earliest copies of Amos.
Oh, earliest copies.
Yeah. Or the earliest version that we've found.
The earliest remnants.
Yeah.
I guess. Well, okay. So for full books, it's usually just the medieval Masoretic texts, and we have the the Septuagint version. Obviously, that's there might be some fragments from Qumran. I don't know, but I don't think there are any older ones than that. If there are.
All right. Well, there's this section you wanted me to read from Eerdman's commentary on the Bible. It says, critical scholars have posited a number of theories concerning the composition of this prophetic text. Many envision a core of oracles attributable to the prophet. Some early editions, such as the third-person narrative of 7:10 through 17, by a group of disciples. Other later expansions to the message before and during the exile to include Judah in the message's purview, and finally a post-exilic word of hope. Nevertheless, several recent commentators have argued for the substantial authenticity of the book on historical and linguistic grounds. Literary approaches have demonstrated a high degree of artistry and cohesiveness. that could weaken the force of a theory of various redactions spanning centuries.
Yeah, I want to point out quickly that one of the big ones is the way that Hoyt describes it. I should not have taken out the bookmark. But the way that she describes it is the series of, like syntactically speaking, it's a series of like X and then X plus 1. So I'm going to see if I can.
Well, I think that's noted
section.
here.
Is it? Okay.
It might be. It says, for instance, the book exhibits a number of series of 5 and 7 items and utilizes several chiastic structures. A recent commentary tries to combine a critical stance with a sensitivity to this literary craft.
The first stylistic feature that many notice is the numerological statements X plus 1, used in the oracles to the nations. The purpose and features of these statements are discussed at the beginning of the examination of chapter 1. In short, the numerological statements highlight the mercy that Yahweh has shown in not punishing the nations prior. These numerological statements introduce only one sin that was the tipping point. Related to these numerological statements is the use of the number 7, which is the number of completion. The numerological statements use 3 plus 4, which, by the way, equals 7, guys. We wouldn't know that without the Bible.
How would you know without that?
Landon couldn't have even told me that.
That's some serious math there.
Yeah. So additionally,
or arithmetic, actually.
Additionally, the list of oracles against the nations lists 7 nations, then adds 1, Israel, which is the sucker punch that tricks the audience. The expected 7 turns into an unexpected 8. Limburg also notes many other uses of 7s and 7 plus 1s throughout the book. This includes lists of 7 items, which could indicate a stylistic choice or perhaps indicate completeness. In some places, a list of 7 is given, then an 8th climactic item is listed. Limburg describes these as sayings that are central to the book of Amos. So that is basically the argument for more unity, that you have this stylistic choice throughout. And that was an interesting point that was brought up by Hoyt there. So furthermore, I just want to talk about a little bit about the arguments here that are used by Wolff. So initially, out of all the things that he notes about the formation, now he's like, it should be clear that this has developed over time, and he gives it good chunks. So first he starts talking about the superscription. Analysis of the superscription in 1:1 indicates that its oldest level can be recognized in the phrase "the words of Amos of Tekoa." If we ask which collection of oracles might have been thus introduced, the indications point to chapters 3 through 6. For the oracles in 1:3 through 2:16 are immediately introduced by the messenger formula as words of Yahweh. Hence, the initial rubric, words of Amos, characterizes this material no more appropriately than it would the vision reports in chapters 7 through 9. So yeah, because the introduction there is for the words of Amos, but it goes on to be the words of Yahweh, it would make sense that was, probably added later. Which it would make sense if it was added later. If you're looking at it like historically. So the literary fixation of the cycles. So the 5 reports of visions in chapters 7 through 9 must certainly, on the basis of their autobiographical style, be traced to Amos himself. General correspondences, as well as similarities of detail, contribute to the surmise that the cycle of oracles against the nations was fixed literarily at the same time as the visions, the 5-part structuring with the formation of pairs, and with the climax being reached in the final part. The repetition of framing sentences and key sentences, the close thematic relationships between the two concluding parts of the cycle, and significant minor correspondences, such as use of the concluding formula of the messenger speech Yahweh has said, which is otherwise unusual in the book of Amos. Then he talks about the additions from like the disciples and stuff. So the first traces of this early redaction are evident in the second relative clause of the present superscription, quote, which he viewed concerning Israel 2 years before the earthquake. So he views that not as one section, but as two. One clause was added to the first one. Unlike Amos himself, the redaction does not use saw, past tense, but rather viewed. They're both past tense. So use a different word there. Yet it does link the visions with the words, though not without some stylistic abrasiveness. Hence, also, the recorded cycles are set as brackets around the words of Amos from Tekoa, comparable to the method ancient redactors were fond of using to incorporate more recent literary material with which they were closely associated into existing works. This older redaction of the superscription, evident in the second relative clause, can be attributed to the old school of Amos, that we must certainly reckon with such a circle of disciples concerned with the transmission of the master's work, of the master's words, is shown first by the insertion of a third-person report of Amos's experiences in chapter 7 into the first-person reports of the visions. And I mean, he has like very long arguments for this stuff. Like they're multiple pages. And then he talks about the exposition on Bethel, which he dates this to the time of the Josianic age, although I don't think that's necessary, honestly. But because I think one of his big arguments there was the man of God from Judah, which I think he's interpreting as... was it in this section? Yeah, okay. So he starts talking a little bit about the hymn in chapter 4 and 5 here. So the hymn in 4, 5, and 9 consists of 3 strophes. The first two strophes introduced by homilies, which seek to relate the oracles of Amos against Bethel to Josiah's destruction of the sanctuary. Josiah's measures should be acknowledged in accordance with 2 Kings 23 as the fulfillment of the prophecy of the man of God from Judah. So that's 1 Kings 13, and thereby as Yahweh's act. So I think his man of God from Judah thing would be Josiah, and I think there I think he does mention that there's a reference to that here, or maybe I misread it completely. So in addition, I consider it likely that 1-2 goes back to the same Bethel exposition of the Josianic age, here with reference to Amos's own proclamation. The new judgment of Yahweh is announced as being sent forth from Jerusalem into regions of the northern kingdom. The later Deuteronomistic redaction could not speak of Jerusalem in such a positive manner. Yeah, and then he has a Deuteronomistic redaction afterwards. So it's he splits it up into quite a few sections. I don't know if those are all necessary, but I definitely do think that there were redactional periods, but maybe not as intensely as Wolf does.
All right, so
that's the commentary.
I also want to point out that once we finish Amos, the book of Obadiah is 1 chapter.
We're going to have a great episode on Obadiah, guys.
Yep.
I look forward to that after this.
Yep. But
yeah, we're getting into the little itty bitty books there. But by the way, in case you were wondering, I am going to be reading from the New American Standard Bible, the reference edition from A.J. Holman Company. Could be copyrighted God, but copyrights only last 75 years after the death of the author. So it depends on whether God's dead and when God died, if God existed.
Well, according to the Christians, Jesus is God and Jesus died. It's a central part of the story.
The body died.
I don't think that the copyright law says if you come back to life, you get back your copyright.
There you go.
I think 3 days in the grave is like, sorry, Jesus, all your copyrights expire 75 years, in CE, at 75 CE. So it probably is not copyright God.
There you go. Anyways, why don't I get started in the book of Amos?
What?
Because we've just spent 34 minutes talking about it.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So, book of Amos, chapter 1. And you know what? Before I get into the book,
it says the judgment of neighbor nations. By the way, in my book, my text.
Well, I don't get a heading like that here, but I do want to point out that we've had in other books references to Amos very frequently. A lot of things have popped up in the commentaries which have referred to specific verses in Amos. So maybe we'll have a little bit of the reverse of that as we go through Amos and find a whole bunch of references to other things in the Bible too.
Yeah.
So keep an eye out.
I mean, because there's certainly references to 2 Samuel verse 4, chapter 14, verse 2, with regards to the first verse on there. So there's some stuff from that involved.
Okay, now I will get started. Chapter 1. The words of Amos, who was among the herdmen of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, 2 years before the earthquake.
Yeah, so we went on at length about this verse, so I'm not going to get into it too much, although I do want to just remind people that the part where it says among the shepherds, I think it makes sense from Hoyt that this should be translated as among the overseers of the shepherds.
Which may be the case. And he said, the Lord will roar from Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem, and the habitations of the shepherds shall mourn, and the top of Carmel shall wither. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Damascus, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they have threshed Gilead with threshing instruments of iron. But I will...
Bad to use iron on there. This is probably, once you allow them to do iron instruments, next thing you have iron chariots, and then it's all over.
Yeah, but there's the classic 3 and 4 thing that we talked about before.
Yep.
But I will send a fire into the house of Hazael, which shall devour the palaces of Ben-Hadad. So, do you have anything on Hazael and Ben-Hadad?
I probably do, but let me tell you, this commentary, man, they go on at length about like every little section. What was that, verse 4?
That was verse 4, yes.
All right. Let's see. Yahweh announces that it is he who will carry out the punishment. He is the real force behind the impending catastrophes. The threat of being consumed by fire is also directed against Israel, both in the second vision and in 5:6. As in these later oracles, the oracle against Damascus isolates as the particularly important property of fire, that the fact that it devours is the fact that it devours. The imagery of devouring fire. Oh, man. Yeah, here. Okay, so here we are. Amos names as rulers of Damascus the Aramean kings Hazael and Ben-Hadad. The name of Ben-Hadad seems to be attested 3 times in the succession of Aramean kings. Ben-Hadad the first, son of Tabramon, ruled at the beginning of the 9th century. He must be distinguished from the enemy of King Ahab of Israel in the middle of the 9th century, who is regularly called King of Aram, a title also borne by the quite possibly identical Bar-Hadad of the Aramaic inscription from El-Brej. According to 2 Kings 8:15, this Ben-Hadad was assassinated by Hazael, whom Shalmaneser III calls the son of a nobody. A son of this dynasty founder, Hazael, again bore the old Damascene royal name Ben-Hadad. He is mentioned in 2 Kings 13 and on the Zakir stele from Hamath. This later Ben-Hadad was a contemporary of Adad-Nirari, the third of Assyria, and the kings of Jehoahaz and Jehoash of Israel, which means that his reign extended from 806 down to the 8th century. The available sources do not allow us to decide whether it was under his rule that the Aramean state again increased in power, or whether Amos had in mind a Hazael II, a Ben-Hadad IV, or even someone bearing an entirely different name.
It's also noteworthy when it talks about the 3 and 4 trespasses of Damascus. Alter notes, in context, Pesha'am, or Pesha'im, means something like atrocities or crimes against humanity. Right. So this is a common biblical idiom occurring several times in Proverbs with the sense a certain few and even one more. Because the 3 and 4 together add up to the formulaic 7, some have proposed that they indicate a totality. There's no way of knowing whether these dire prophecies about the surrounding nations were actually the beginnings of Amos's message, but they certainly would have provided a means of drawing in the Israelite audience with something that they wanted to hear before the prophet launched on a denunciation of that very audience. So yeah, there's that.
Fantastic.
Yes. Now I'll continue. I will break also the bar of Damascus, and cut off the inhabitant from the plain of Avon, and him that holdeth the scepter from the house of Eden, and the people of Syria shall go into captivity unto Kir, saith the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Gaza, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they carried away captive the whole captivity to deliver them up to Edom.
So if they just stopped with 6, that would have been okay?
Yeah, it's that would be fine.
It's always the one thing that pushes it over the top. So yeah, Gaza alone is mentioned initially in the oracle against the Philistines, as was Damascus in the oracle against the Arameans. Apparently, Gaza was considered foremost among the Philistine cities, even though it was the southernmost of them, situated at the borderland with Egypt. The indictment specifies deportation of people. At issue here is the practice associated with war from the earliest times in the ancient Orient of enslaving those taken captive.
And uprooting an entire population means putting an end to the national existence. It's viewed as a war crime.
Well, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. Of course, it would be today, too.
So is there a reason for something being so special? Yeah, I guess. I mean, when you have a calendar worked out, in the tradition, it seems like 7 was just a decent way to divide it into weeks. So it represented completeness.
But I will send a fire on the wall of Gaza, which shall devour the palaces thereof, and I will cut off the inhabitants from Ashdod, and him that holdeth the scepter from Ashkelon. And I will turn mine hand against Ekron, and the remnant of the Philistines shall perish, saith the Lord. So this is like a punishment in kind for their destroying of the whole nation of Edom.
Yeah.
Destroying a whole nation, basically. Not specifically Edom. They were
sent
carried up to
Edom. Yeah.
Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Tyrus, that's Tyre, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they delivered up the whole captivity to Edom, and remembered not the brotherly covenant. But I will send a fire on the wall of Tyrus, which shall devour the palaces thereof. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Edom, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because he did pursue his brother with the sword, and did cast off all pity, and his anger did tear perpetually, and he kept his wrath forever. But I will send a fire upon Timon, which shall devour the palaces of Bozrah. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of the children of Ammon, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they have ripped up the woman with child of Gilead, that they might enlarge their border.
Yeah, so the description of Ammon's sin is quite graphic and stands apart from from most of the other sins listed in this section of oracles. The sins by Gaza, Tyre, and Edom describe only general captivity of people, which could have and likely did include extreme physical violence, but the focus of their sin is simply given as their role in taking people captive. Ammon's sin, along with Damascus, stand apart. Both list aggressively heinous acts against the people of Gilead. While it is likely that Damascus's sin of threshing Gilead with threshing sledges of iron is likely intended figuratively, the same is not true of Ammon's sin. Ammon's sin, ripping open the pregnant women of Gilead, is detailed and heinous, which lends more toward it being an actual record of events and not simply a figurative hyperbole. This one, I wouldn't know. I mean, yeah, it definitely is more graphic. Absolutely.
And it actually describes an event.
I mean, yeah.
As opposed to some of these, which
don't. They're not describing the event. They're just saying this event happened. In this one, I would... You know what? Yeah. I guess. Why not? I guess they were really horrible to people in Gilead.
But I will kindle a fire in the wall of Rabbah, and it shall devour the palaces thereof, with shouting in the day of battle, with a tempest in the day of the whirlwind, and their kings shall go into captivity, he and his princes together, saith the Lord.
Apparently, this judgment statement is specifically directed toward Rabbah, the capital of Ammon. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence that Rabbah was destroyed by fire during the 8th century. Who's the citation here? Okay, I guess that's not that bad. If they were citing... there's some scholars that if you'd cite them, I'd be like, no, probably not. So yeah, Amos declares that the heart of Ammon will lose its defenses or its walls and be destroyed. As a unique addition, this judgment statement is followed by a description of what will accompany the destruction.
Now that is the end of chapter 1, though the formula does continue.
It does, yeah.
But if you're enjoying the stream so far, give us a like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends, family, neighbors, etc.
Yeah, there's definitely quite a bit here. I have all the stuff pulled up, so you don't gotta worry about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is quite a lot.
Where does chapter 2 okay, there it is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're going to address the sins of Moab, and then we're going to talk about Judah.
Yeah, so that would be like that final nail in the coffin right there, Judah.
Yeah. And let me just pull up.
That one wouldn't be the nail in the coffin. That would be Israel, because Israel's the last one.
So, why don't you get into chapter 2?
I will. Thank you. Thus says the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Moab, and for 4, I will not revoke the punishment, because he burned... Wait, what the hell? He burned to lime the bones of the king of Edom. Is that supposed to be limestone? Is that what they're going for?
Well,
lime is its own thing, I think. And yes, you can get
there's
it from
limestone, and then there's obviously the fruit. Is there another definition that I don't know?
Yes.
For concrete, there's a type of powder called lime.
So first of all, Alter points out that desecrating a corpse is a violation of human dignity and thus is a war crime. Now, if you're asking about lime, the problem with the word is that cremated bodies do not turn into lime.
Yeah, they don't. It's just a similar kind of substance.
Yep. Elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible, when a body dies, it turns into dust, not lime. Granted, bodies were not normally burned. Since there are so few instances of burning bodies in Scripture, it is just not clear whether the remains of those cremated would have been described as dust or lime. It's possible that the use of lime is distinct from dust in how they were created. Thus, dust refers to the natural results of decomposition, while lime refers to the remnants left from the fire. Of course, we have a different understanding of lime now, which has its own composition.
How does Alter translate that verse?
Yeah, he also says for his burning the bones of Edom's king into lime.
Okay. So, I mean, I could see how it might be mistaken, I guess. But also, no, there's plenty of descriptions of burning bodies in the Bible, just not human ones necessarily.
It says in Wolf's commentary, if Amos stresses to lime, he surely wants to underscore the totality of the destruction.
Sure.
The corpse was burned so thoroughly that the bone ashes became as fine and white as powdered chalk. The Vulgate brings out this nuance by specifying that the bones were burned entirely unto ashes. But since Amos apparently had in his mind something especially reprehensible, we must probably follow the Targum in interpreting the term to mean that the Moabites had manufactured from these royal ashes some substance which could be used to whitewash stones and houses.
Well, damn. That's a way more morbid interpretation, and I kind of love it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's true, but I love that interpretation.
Yeah.
So let's continue on here. Because he burnt to lime the bones of the king of Edom. So I will send a fire upon Moab, and it shall devour the strongholds of Kerioth, and Moab shall die amid uproar, amid shouting and the sound of the trumpet. I will cut off the ruler from its midst, and I will kill all its princes with him. You know, a lot of these nations, of course, we've heard polemics about them before, and some of them were, I guess a couple of these polemics were the same, but not too many, I guess. These seem like primitive forms of it, which makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And this is a kind of a formulaic, it kind of breaks the formula, really. They're going to die in an uproar and shouts and the sounds of the ram's horn, which implies a war. So that's in battle rather than just being burned, right?
Yeah. Thus says, and we're on verse 4 now. Yeah. Thus says the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Judah, and for 4, I will not revoke the punishment, because they have rejected the law of the Lord and have not kept my statutes, but their lies have led them astray, those after which their fathers walked. So I will send a fire upon Judah, and it shall devour the strongholds of Jerusalem.
So,
yes,
go on.
I bet you that they didn't deal with the high places either.
No, they didn't.
No,
they were around. They were everywhere. The place was filled with high places.
It was extra high.
3 and 4 idols in each high place, probably.
That's quite the sin.
Yeah.
What if there were 7?
Ugh, that's horrible.
That's a full set.
So Alter notes that while some scholars claim the introduction of Judah is a later editorial interpolation, it makes perfect sense that this Judahite prophet, moving from pronouncements of doom on the surrounding nations to Israel, would include a denunciation of the trespasses of his own kingdom before arriving at his main target, the northern kingdom of Israel. For the false things, this is an epithet of idols, which makes this a very different kind of transgression from the crimes against humanity. Some here see Deuteronomistic language, thus attributing this text to a much later date than that of Amos. But this identification is not convincing, even if the anti-idolatry theme resembles Deuteronomy.
Yeah, that's once again, there's I don't know if Wolf has an argument for that, but I do see why, given the context, it would make sense that this is a later edition.
Yeah, Wolf does say that the phraseology through the indictment on Judah reflects the language of the Deuteronomistic school. But, okay, there's like
he
there's
goes
a
on,
few
like-
terms, basically some parts of the formulation that are consistent with the Deuteronomistic history, but it's not like in great depth that he goes into. Now here in, who is this? Hoyt?
Yeah.
Hoyt's
Remember, they stand like almost on the exact opposite ends of the spectrum. Because Wolf is like, this has a very long compositional history, and Hoyt's like, there's barely any compositional history.
Mm-hmm. Well, Hoyt's position on these verses is that they're especially at fault because they were under the Mosaic covenant, whereas the other nations were judged on general relations, treatment of their fellow humans, and international treaties and covenants they'd made.
They're still under the Mosaic covenant. Both Israel and Judah would have been under it. But
they're not talking about Israel here. They're talking about the other nations that were just addressed.
Oh, those ones. Okay.
Yeah.
No, because this
Those
is
ones-
Judah that we just...
Yeah. So let me finish my sentences.
Sorry.
Right? Well, the other ones are judged based on those things. Judah's judged for breaking their covenant with Yahweh, while Amos could have provided a long list of ways that Judah had broken the covenant. He simply states that they had rejected the law of Yahweh and didn't keep his statutes. The phrase law of Yahweh refers elsewhere to the law given in the Mosaic covenant. The last two lines clarify why they did it. They believed their lies. The lies is a very general statement that provides no clarity on the specific lies they believed. Yet the types of lies they believed is evidently in other passages of the Old Testament that they worshipped false gods and idols and believed false prophetic messages. So it says here that one might think that Judah as a nation that specifically broke Yahweh's covenant as opposed to the other previous nations and broke more man-made and general covenants would receive a very harsh judgment. They did not, which makes the later judgments on the northern kingdom all the more surprising. Judah only received the standard judgment statement, and it's quite bare, even compared to the others.
The standard judgment statement. Here's the baseline bad thing that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's not too bad, I guess, in comparison to the other things.
It's not extreme.
It's not extreme, but like, so I will send a fire upon Judah and she'll devour the strongholds of Jerusalem. Like, I'm sorry, but this section does seem kind of post-exilic. Or maybe even actually exilic. So it's I don't know, this section on Judah does kind of seem like a later edition. Sorry, Hoyt.
Oof.
So anyways, let's hop into the judgment on Israel. Thus, okay, thanks for that. So thus says the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Israel, and for 4, I will not revoke the punishment, because they sell the righteous for silver, and the needy for a pair of sandals. Those who trample the head of the poor into the dust of the earth and turn that's just another way to say curb stomp.
Yes, they're selling the needy for sandals, which means selling a person into slavery for something of relatively minor value.
Yeah, I get that. But yeah, those who trample the head of the poor into the dust of the earth. Sorry, that sounds like a curb stomp.
Yes, it does.
And turn aside the way of the afflicted. A man and his father go into the... Oh my God, this is great. So a man and his father go into the same girl so that my holy name is profaned.
Oh
no.
boy.
One understanding that has had considerable currency is that they both go to the same cult prostitute, but this is not certain. The word for girl, na'ara, means a nubile young woman, with no special indication of her profession or sexual activity. The choice of the term here is pointed. A na'ara could conceivably be an appropriate sexual partner for a young man, but a son and a father sharing her is an abomination, in fact, a kind of incest.
Apparently, yeah.
Yeah. I also want to note that there is an aside in Wolf's commentary, which discusses Israel in the book of Amos.
Great.
It says here
there's so many different names that they use for Israel. There's Israel. They say Joseph. They say Isaac. Like all.
There's
a
lot more. So let's get into this. The name Israel occurs a total of 30 times in Amos. It stands alone in 10 cases. The expression "my people Israel" occurs 4 times. Virgin Israel is found once. Sons of Israel 5 times. House of Israel 8 times. King of Israel twice. On closer inspection, it is apparent that the usage of Israel, House of Israel, and Sons of Israel is not random. The connotation of House of Israel is clearest in 7:10b, where the immediate context is concerned with the fate of the kings of Israel, and consequently with the fate of the royal dynasty in the northern state. But in the remaining 7 occurrences as well, House of Israel refers to the state of the northern kingdom, with its supporting political and cultic institutions in the midst of the rest of the nations of the world. On the other hand, the simple designation Israel appears alongside my people Israel, thus connoting the people of God. This meaning is also implied in 9:7b, where the reference is to God's historical dealings with Israel, and in 2:6 and 3:14, which speak of God's plans for Israel, and in 7:9, 11b, 17b, where the end of history is announced. The expression sons of Israel has the same connotation as Israel, the only distinction between them being stylistic. Sons of Israel usually appears in direct address formulated in the second person plural, the single exception being 3:2, whereas Israel always appears in the third person singular referent, except in the case of 4:12. So when they use the term Israel and variants of the term Israel throughout this book, they have different connotations based off of, I guess, the qualifiers that are attached to the term Israel. And
there's so much. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And the fact that they use names for Israel that we haven't seen before, like Isaac and Joseph. Mm-hmm. Like we've heard like the sons of Joseph, right? Sons of Isaac, but just Israel as Isaac or Joseph.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting one.
What verse are you on now?
So so
you're on verse 8, right?
Yeah, verse 8. They lay themselves down beside every altar on garments taken in pledge, and in the house of their God they drink the wine of those who have been fined. So they're in cahoots with criminals, maybe, I don't know. That's what that was the second clause looks like. The first one looks like more profaning of something holy.
So they're in situations in which a poor person might borrow money from a richer relative or acquaintance. In such instances, the poor person would give their cloak to the one who had lent them money as a pledge that they could repay. The Mosaic
like collateral.
Yeah, the Mosaic law specifically calls on the lender not to keep the cloak beyond the end of the day. The exchange of the cloak was largely symbolic and not actually intended as collateral. A poor person would have had very few possessions, and the cloak would have served not only as clothing, but as warmth at night and protection from the elements.
That's what clothing is, but okay.
Yeah. Well, basically the point being is that they're not returning these pledged garments. They're using them as decoration, basically.
I see. Okay. Or not even as decoration, as like a carpet.
Yeah, just to step on. So
or lay on, I guess.
Yeah. So you would just, screw over the poor person.
What if this has to do with the with the thing from before, with a man and his father going to the same girl? What if they lay themselves down next to the altar and all?
Well, that would be especially sinful, right?
Especially sinful.
Accumulating sin. They just keep having more sin thrown onto that one scenario.
Yeah.
But this is an example of how they're breaking the Mosaic law.
On to verse 9 here. Yet it was I who destroyed the Amorite before them, whose height was like the height of the cedars, and who was as strong as the oaks. I destroyed his fruit above and his and his roots beneath.
So
we've seen that a lot.
Yeah. What's noteworthy here is when they note the height of these people.
The greatness of the cedars.
Yeah. The gigantic stature of the Canaanites is registered in Numbers 13 and elsewhere.
Yeah.
If you remember when Moses brought the people to the land of Canaan, he sent in these scouts, and they came back and reported that they're giants, man.
Also, it was I who brought you up out of the land of Egypt and led you 40 years in the wilderness to possess the land of the Amorite. And I raised up some of your sons for prophets and some of your young men for Nazarites. It is not indeed so, is it not indeed so, O people of Israel? Declares the Lord. So, of course, that's just, here's what happened in the Torah. But it's interesting that they use land of the Amorite there.
Yeah, what verse was that? Verse 9?
That was verse 10.
Verse 10.
Yeah. I don't know if Alter maybe has something on that.
There isn't anything on that in Alter, but the land of the Amorites ties it to the covenant loyalty from the previous example. Not only did Yahweh drive out the Amorites, but he is the very reason they entered the land to begin with.
So it is noteworthy that here in recounting the Exodus, the verb to bring up is used rather than to lead out, since in the Deuteronomic or Deuteronomistic literature, the latter verb is far more frequently employed for this purpose. Certainly, we find the use of to bring up in texts which are unquestionably older, such as Amos and Hosea, while the book of Deuteronomy employs to bring up, which when referring to the Exodus in only one instance, in contrast to the 20 instances in which it so uses to lead out. Nevertheless, it is in the Deuteronomic usage of the word which best accounts for the word choice in our text. Thus, we find that to bring up is employed where the gift of the land is included within a retrospective view of the Exodus.
I also want to note
so he does view this as a later addition.
Yeah. I want to note that part of this formula that pops up is that I will not revoke its punishment. And this pops up in all of these things.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But the Hebrew literally means I will not cause it to return, which has different connotations.
It does, especially if you mean returning to a place literally.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you just mean like the stability of it.
Yeah.
So it is interesting that the translation is less. Oh, so yeah, the translation is less literal here. Yeah.
You know,
that's an interesting
You
one.
should read verse 11 because there's some commentary on there that's interesting.
I will. And I raised up. Wait, I already read that one. Yeah, I raised up some of your sons for prophets and some of your young men for Nazarites.
Yeah, you didn't finish the verse.
I did.
I mean,
is it not indeed so, O people of Israel, declares the Lord?
Yeah, they should be grateful, I guess, for that, is what.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. But no, I did finish that. I can read verse 12, which continues on some Nazarite stuff and prophet stuff.
Yeah.
But you made the Nazarites drink wine and commanded the prophets, saying, "You shall not prophesy."
Yeah, so this is noteworthy. The Nazarites take a vow of abstention from alcohol, thus constituting a kind of elite holiness within the people. The likely motive for giving them wine is not sheer perversity, but reflects an indiscriminate abuse of alcohol in the Israelite population, or
peer pressure. It's
of
peer
the
pressure.
sort that Isaiah would denounce a few decades after Amos. There's a note here. Verse 12 is often separated from the preceding verses and is related to verse 7 through 8 as another list of sins. There's no doubt that this verse describes more of Israel's sins, but this verse's relationship to its immediate context needs to be considered. Verse 12 begins with a verb that signals that it's closely related to what precedes, and verse 12 describes how Israel responded to the prophets and Nazarites that Yahweh gave them in verse 11. So while this verse does describe Israel's sins, it's not intended as a continuation of the list in 7 through 8, but in direct relationship to Yahweh's actions. These Nazarites are especially important people when it comes to God. Like, they're especially holy people.
Right. There was that whole thing in Exodus about the Nazarites.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a good verse, verse 13 here.
Mm-hmm.
Behold!
Behold.
Look how beautiful that was. Thank you, Landon.
Yeah.
I will press you down in your place as a cart full of sheaves presses down.
So, pressing down, it can mean to weigh down. Its likely biblical sense is to bring to a stop.
Yeah, like
Or
gonna be,
yeah.
gonna be pushed down, gonna be held.
But
Pin you against the map.
there's an archaeological note here that says that a mural from Nineveh dating to about 700 BC and depicting the Assyrian campaign against Lachish shows such a cart with two spoked wheels being drawn by a pair of oxen. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's
Okay.
I just thought that was interesting.
Flight shall perish from the swift, and the strong shall not retain his strength, nor shall the mighty save his life. So yeah, all these things that you'd expect them to do, they can't do. They are being stopped in their tracks.
Right, and they use the words of an invading army, essentially, to describe this. It also follows from being halted, where they talk about the swift.
Yeah, exactly. He who handles the bow shall not stand, and he who is swift of foot shall not save himself, nor shall he who rides the horse save his life. And he who is stout of heart among the mighty shall flee away naked in that day, declares the Lord. People gonna be streaking.
No, well,
Not really, but
while the literal sense of naked is possible, the likely meaning is that the brave warrior, now terrified by the overwhelming force of the enemy, will strip himself of his armor and throw away his weapons to flee.
yeah, something like that would make way more sense. Although it is a funny visual, bunch of streakers.
Yeah, it is.
I hear there's a football game going on today, so if you're there, you should go. I mean, I'm sure there may be multiple football games going on today, but go streaking, go have some fun, guys. And then just say that Amos made you do it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, American soccer.
Yeah. Either way, that is the end of chapter 2. If you guys are enjoying the stream so far, please make sure to drop a like, subscribe if you haven't, share it around. We got a lot of good stuff.
Click that like button.
yeah.
Yes.
And
Share
do
it with
you
your- what is that?
hear
What?
something?
I hear something horribly.
So,
Behold, I am your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and I want to let all you heathens and sinners know that I support this wonderful episode of Atheist Sunday School. Lawrence and Reuben try their very best to bring you the true glory of the Bible, and they need your help. They have provided links to their Patreon page and other social media just for you. Once again, my name is Jesus Christ, and this is Milwaukee Atheists. The Lord is with them. God bless.
Oh my God, Jesus! Thank you for stopping by and being so kind. Also, thank you for taking away Reuben. He has once again disappeared. He has ascended once more. Perhaps he will come back with revelation. Now,
in the meantime, we've got Landon Noll.
we have Landon Noll. Yeah. So this next chapter, I mean, I don't really think there's much to introduce for this chapter. Although I think we are switching matters. Though we're not going to have those speeches, those judgments against all those nations and Israel and Judah. Not going to be having that right now. Instead, we are flipping the script. We're going into something a little bit different, which is good, I suppose, because I definitely did not want to read those things for the entire show. It was just going to be the same thing, essentially speaking. Oh my God! Look who has returned.
And what happened?
Okay.
I received a vision.
How was your vision?
Did you see?
I saw 3 transgressions and 4, and they're in response to that they're not going to be returning.
Oh no!
Wait, the transgressions won't be returning?
Yeah,
good.
Those damn transgressions, they're banned. We're done with them.
Banning transgressions.
At least 3 and 4 of them. Maybe 3 and 3. You can't do 3 and 4. You got to do 3 and 3 because otherwise bad things will happen.
And I'm glad that Jay Dollar Sign passes out flyers for our show.
Awesome.
So yeah, this section that we're getting into, it's based. You know how we've seen in the Bible a few times now. We've seen these judgment scenes where it's set up like a court case.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of those.
All right. Well, let's hop into it then. Landon, take it off. Don't take it all off, but there's pretty much commentary.
Let me have the helium rise in a voice and say, well, chapter 3.
There's commentary pretty much for every verse here.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. Although, this is where I think, I think Wolf, this was where he pretty much said, like, it really started, right? Because these are the words of Amos.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it's the next major section.
It is.
All right. Hear this word which the Lord has spoken against you, sons of Israel, against the entire family which he has brought up from the land of Egypt.
So this family, the term that Alter uses is clan. He says the Hebrew mishpacha slides from a clan proper to larger groups. It may be used here to underscore the mutual belonging of the Israelites. I don't know if Lawrence has anything to say.
I don't.
You only have me amongst all families of the earth. Therefore, I will punish you for all your iniquities.
So when it says you only have me, Alter's translation is a little different.
I also have a different translation.
Yeah, Alter says, only with you was I intimate of all the clans of the earth. And he says that the literal sense of the verb is to know, which famously has in some contexts a sexual connotation, but here is employed to suggest a special close relationship.
I agree with Cameron, giggity, especially with this one. So only you have I chosen for a covenant relationship. Covenant relationship.
Yeah.
So apparently, it is also sometimes noted as looks like the Targum says only with you have I taken pleasure. So,
Ooh.
hey, do you guys want to go take some pleasure later?
Well, speaking of that, verse 3 says, do two men walk together unless they have made an appointment?
So
this is like an interrogation.
It's like an interrogation.
Yeah.
Well, Alter notes that these words initiate an extended anaphoric series, arriving in a compelling conclusion that will not be revealed until verse 8. Everything in nature and in human affairs exhibits a pattern of cause and effect, including the call to prophecy. Now, the specific terms that are used here...
Yeah, so these are rhetorical questions coming up, obviously.
Right, but I think it's a rhetorical question that fails, because people do sometimes walk together without making a special agreement to do so in advance.
They do, yes. That is, in fact, something that happens plenty of times.
You guys want to go for a walk later?
Apparently,
No.
Okay.
they even have emoji cons with two men walking. No,
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah, look at that.
Those two don't have an appointment.
This first rhetorical question reinforces the truth of Israel's covenantal relationship with Yahweh. Oh, yeah, Yahweh and Israel are walking together. Gotcha. That's what they're going for.
Unless they mean like walk in like a military sense, which like usually that would imply some kind of agreement between nations. But they're simplifying it down to two men. So I don't think it means that.
I also don't think it means that.
Yeah, and then my text suggests that an alternate translation for appointment is agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So verse 4, does a lion roar in the forest when he has no prey? Yes. Does a young lion growl from his den unless he has captured something? Yes. and I say yes because I've observed that in Africa. In fact, most of the time, the males don't actually hunt. They just roar and steal from the females who hunt and capture. And young lions, they're learning to be lions, growl in their den. So the answer is yes to both.
What was that
the quest? Was that the answers that Amos was looking for?
Who knows if they were rhetorical questions?
Well, I mean, yeah, they're supposed to be rhetorical, but so it is possible that the two related bicola refer to two different stages of a lion's hunt. Paul lists the first roar. That's a different scholar. Lists the first roar as the sound made when the lion confronts its prey, but before it catches it. The second is a growl of victory once the lion is back in the den.
Oh.
This is a possible understanding, and there is support for this reading.
Well, it should be observed that all of the instances cited involve either the inspiring of fear or the creating of an entrapment. So the call to prophecy is scary, and it locks the person called in a trap.
Wow.
All right, then.
Wow. Anyway, so let's go back to verse 5. Another question. Does a bird fall into a trap on the ground when there is no bait in it?
Sometimes.
It could. It very well could.
Yeah.
Does a trap spring up from the earth when it captures nothing at all?
If it's poorly set up?
Yep. Yeah, that could happen. There is a decent amount of stuff on this. So, man as well as beast is the deadly enemy of other animals. The didactic questions progress in well-ordered fashion. So you have to fall and to spring up. So they're paralleled there. Hunting is also an activity familiar to the sheep breeder. He and his shepherds having more leisure time than the peasant to engage in this pursuit. Of course, the sheep breeder was no hunter of big game. Amos identifies two hunting implements by name. So you have, he calls it a wooden missile. That's the more literal translation, I guess. First is a wooden missile. Must be a sort of throwing stick since it causes a bird to fall to the ground. So apparently the word means they're a wooden missile.
Okay.
There is evidence that the boomerang and the throwing stick were common hunting weapons in the ancient Near East, being used primarily to catch birds, though also being effective against rabbits. The second, a folding net, that's the trap, is the snaring device set up to trap either small animals or more commonly birds. G.R. Driver identifies the wooden missile as the movable part of a trap. However, even according to Driver, the word designates a complete snaring device for otherwise not only the falling of a bird to the ground, but also the frequent parallelism would be incomprehensible. And that's the commentary there.
Verse 6. If a trumpet is blown in a city, will not the people tremble? Well, if it's blown in a jazz club, they probably might enjoy it.
So the trumpet here is a ram's horn.
Yeah. So
if a calamity occurs in a city, has not the Lord done it? Hashtag blame God.
Yeah, blame. All those calamities like hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes,
missiles.
Yeah, so this is something where the theology is a bit different. So while this isn't like a polemic. There's no polemic against other gods here. Mm-hmm. Of course, in plenty of other books, we do get direct polemic against other gods and other cults. But in this book, we don't get any of that. It's just Yahweh is the guy that does everything. So in this section, it's very blatantly acknowledged that he sends the calamities, and there's really not a further discussion of who's good and who's bad. Not like in the cases we've talked about before, right? Where God does send destroying armies, but then he punishes the armies. That second part's taken out. Or I shouldn't say taken out, but it's just not there in this book.
Yeah. Now, it should also be noted that the trumpet is a ram's horn. It was sounded when there was a military crisis occurring that was approaching the city.
Right.
So that one's appropriate, depending on your translation. If it just says trumpet, then not really.
Well, yeah, but not a modern trumpet. That's for
same intent, though.
Yeah, so far, Amos is really bad at rhetorical questions.
And you probably would get pissed off at my answers too. I
yeah, they get really mad at you.
You're too skeptical.
You would have said about the jazz club, but that's sinful. So that's why the Lord's going to punish you, because that one of the nice thing apparently about hell is that's where all the good jazz players are.
Yeah, that's a fact. Seen it myself with my own two eyes.
Okay.
That one time you stared at a black mirror.
Yeah, that's where it was. Yeah.
Lawrence is just staring into this black mirror. He sees like in Charlie Bird and shit. He's like, "Whoa, man."
Okay, verse 7. Surely the Lord God does nothing unless he reveals his secret counsel to his servants, the prophets.
So some see this verse as an intrusion.
Yeah.
But it's connected to the previous line by several terms and serves as a transition to verse 8. Now, Alter notes that this prose verse breaks the poetic series, and in the way it makes explicit the points of the images, but it looks like an editorial interpolation.
Yeah, it seems like it seems like Wolf agrees with that he calls it a deuteronomistic insertion, only loosely connected with the prophetic disputation. So it expounds upon the recognition of the tie between the events of history and the previously proclaimed word of Yahweh. The view that Yahweh does nothing without prophetic announcement can scarcely be attributed to Amos. Certainly, he shares the general perspective of Israel that Yahweh initiates calamity. But what he must impress upon the people is precisely that Yahweh does speak and so compel a prophet to proclaim. And that he does this as an act of his free and uncoerced will. The Deuteronomistic school, on the other hand, explored the whole history of Israel for the interlocking of prophetic word and historical event. It is in accord with the theology of this school that our interpreter wishes to explain the disputation of Amos. Yeah, so he's in agreement there with Alter.
Yeah.
And I actually kind of wonder what I'm gonna look through Hoyt's commentary on this verse to see what she thinks, because she is of course the more conservative person, more conservative commentator that we have on this table.
Mm-hmm. Like Glenn Beck.
Or you know what? I would not put Glenn Beck on the same level here.
Oh, okay.
Rush Limbaugh.
Like Rush Limbaugh.
No, oh my God, no. Maybe the God, what's his name? The really annoying contrarian guy, Tucker Carlson.
Oh, okay.
So verse 8. I should mention, by the way, the book I'm reading from was given to me by my grandmother on my 14th birthday, back in Hayward, California, and occasionally I have verses underlined, and I underline verse 8. All right, remember what it says, and so verse 8, the underlined version, because you got to put the little, the little HTML symbol for you, and then /u. A lion has roared. Who will not fear? The Lord God has spoken. Who can but prophesy?
So this is a significant verse. So this is like the envelope of the poem, right? It returns the image first from the lion here to the lion earlier in the poem, and it has a further bookend where it refers to the Lord speaking, which occurs in verse 1. So it's like a double bookend.
Yeah, so it of course, as you mentioned, it calls back to the lion roaring, right? Yeah, it seems like it's pretty much set off by itself. Like it's the conclusion, I guess, like of the rhetorical questions.
Yeah.
I think this is the case of lions roaring. I mean, particularly again, the males do most of the sounding and stuff. It actually is kind of a nice thing to hear. You don't need to fear for it. I mean, I've had in Botswana, actually, I mean, a lion sort of lay on my tent while I was inside the tent. You just lay there and wait until the lion decides not to lie on your tent, because you don't really like move them away, so you just wait it out.
You could hang out with them. Hanging out the lion sounds like fun.
I know it isn't, because lions, lions actually are fairly dirty, filthy animals, even though they're cats. They don't allow things like oxpeckers and so forth to clean the parasites off. So their fur is matted, because they typically stick their face into carcasses. The fur around their face is rather gross in terms of dried dead stuff.
Man, I would still totally hang out with them.
And their breath stank. Remember that male lion that was kind of half laying on my tent. It was a stinky breath that was probably the worst thing there. So
that is unfortunate. That is unfortunate. The rest of that I don't really care about.
About lions.
Like I'll take a couple diseases to hang out with the lion in the wild.
Yeah. So verse 9. Proclaim on the citadels in Ashdod and on the citadels in the land of Egypt, and say, assemble yourselves on the mountains of Samaria and see the great tumults with her and the opposition in her midst.
So yeah, on the mountains of Samaria, I'm gonna guess these are referring to high places.
I mean,
but that's just a guess. I'm looking over the
Alter interprets this as being like Samaria being so full of shame that it's like mountains.
What?
So it says Philistia and Egypt are summoned to serve as witness of the shame of Samaria.
Yeah, I mean, witnesses for sure. Yeah, so he has witnesses called from Ashdod and Egypt. The textual... okay, so here's interesting. The textual variant here, which reads Assyria in place of Ashdod, has long found supporters who argue that it forms a better parallel to Egypt. However, Assyria has not yet come within Amos's political horizon, whereas Philistine cities had occupied his attention elsewhere as well. Perhaps the strongholds of Ashdod had impressed him during the course of his own wanderings. In any case, these strongholds must have been well known to him and his hearers, as was the architecture and wealth of Egypt. So assembled upon the mountains, I can go back and check I need textual commentary on that. But yeah, assembled upon the mountains, the witnesses will have I see. Okay, the witnesses will have a chance to see in the capital city scenes such as those of 4:1 and 6:1, scenes which are described initially as boundless terror. Terror is usually associated with a form of much. So in Ezekiel and Zechariah,
much terror.
Yeah, much terror. If there's terror, there's going to be a lot of it. As a rule, it designates the destructive confusion which Yahweh himself brings upon an army in war, confusion resulting in a carnage of self-destruction. Thus, 1 Samuel 5:11 can speak of a deathly panic. It is the extreme counterpart to the condition of peace. Yeah, no doubt. Therefore, one will have to take this word as referring here to modes of behavior which endanger life, even though Amos is envisioning no activities outside the realm of human interaction. A similar restriction to the connotation of this word is elsewhere attested only in Ezekiel and Proverbs. Yeah, you had a thing that you needed to mention, Landon?
I was just thinking again, this is in context with, we think around natural calamities, like earthquakes, and people viewed eclipses as calamities as well. So I suspect if you go along that theory, then this is in context with, there are bad things happening, and fear God because you've done bad things 3 and 4 times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you should, because if you do enough bad things, it's gonna get you.
Yeah.
Just stick it to 3 and 3, and then you're probably okay.
Yeah.
Verse 10. But they do not know how to do what is right, declares the Lord. These who hoard up violence and devastation in their citadels.
So an expressive ellipsis is put into play. What the Israelites store up in their citadels is the ill-gotten wealth amassed from acts of outrage and plunder. After the prose introduction of verses 9 and 10, the prophecy swings back into poetry, beginning with a foe goes round the land. So, this is basically the end of the prose interlude.
Yeah. So verse 11. Therefore, thus says the Lord God, an enemy, even one surrounding land, will pull down your strength from you, and your citadels will be looted.
So this verse has a syntactical problem that centers on the adverb and circuit or roundabout. The first problem is that the adverb the adverb follows the noun, as is typical for this adverb, but it is connected with is it wow or vav? How is that supposed to be pronounced with the W's?
In modern Hebrew, it's a vav. In ancient Hebrew, it's a wow.
Wow, okay. With the wow conjunction, which is not typical. Without the wow, the phrase could be translated an enemy roundabout. With the wow, though, it is best understood as an enemy, even one surrounding. The problem, though, extends beyond the wow. The pointing on the adverb is atypical. The expected pointing, I can't read the Hebrew there, but it's expected to point to something else. The adverb only loses the comets on the samek.
So that's a K and an S.
Gotcha. Thank you. When a morpheme is added onto the end. This defective vowel pointing raises the question of what the Masoretes were reading. That's about the most interesting thing you're going to get out of this verse.
Okay. Verse 12. Thus says the Lord, just as a shepherd snatches from the lion's mouth a couple of legs or a piece of an ear, so will the sons of Israel dwelling in Samaria be snatched away with a corner of a bed or a cover of a couch.
So there are philological grounds for thinking that the first term pe'ah means head of the bed. Here, elsewhere, it means corner. The second term is obscure, and this translation leans on the poetic parallelism. Sitting on the bed may allude to the indolence of the aristocrats of the northern kingdom. They talk about laying on the end of a couch as well. That's basically what they say.
Yeah.
Altar. They don't really note anything about this verse.
There's a little bit more in Wolf. Again, reflecting the situation in 3:9 through 11, the oracle of verse 12 is likewise directed against the inhabitants of Samaria. The allusion to their luxurious and dissolute style of life hints at the reason for their destruction. In light of 6:4, to sit must here mean a lazy lounging around and sensuous carousing. And for the bed, so the Assyrian bed had two walls, namely a headboard and a footboard. The appropriate Akkadian designations, Amar, Shtu, and Putu, correspond to the Hebrew word pair Amashet and Pe'ah, or Pekah, I guess. Then designates the footboard, while the Hebrew word I can't read must be interpreted as the part of the built for the head. A particularly well-executed example of this part, formed by a beam curved upward in a semicircle and upholstered with cushions, is offered by the 7th century bas-relief depicting Ashurbanipal reclining on his, is it called a divan? I don't know.
It's a bas-relief.
Bas-relief, thank you.
So, verse 13. Hear and testify against the house of Jacob, declares the Lord God, the God of hosts.
Classic God of hosts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Verse 14. For on the day that I punish Israel's transgressions, I will punish the altars of Bethel, and the horns of the altar will be cut off, and they will fall to the ground.
So these
gravity, I guess.
Yeah, the horns of the altars. These would be on the corners. They had horn-like protuberances, which were symbolic of power. So it's
they had that on the thing that they carried the ark on too.
Yeah, Moses' horns.
So this is symbolic of cutting off the power of the altars of Bethel.
Verse 15. I will also smite the winter house together with the summer house. The houses of ivory will also perish, and the great houses will come to an end, declares the Lord.
So these houses, many think that the winter and summer houses are the winter and summer palaces of the king. But members of the wealthy class could well have enjoyed such luxuries. So it's not necessarily the king's. For the houses of ivory, they were not built of ivory, but decorated inside with ornamental ivory panels, some of which have been unearthed by archaeologists. And for the great, the adjective here usually means many, but can also mean great. The target of the destruction is clearly not the habitations of the general populace, but the grand homes of the aristocracy.
Yeah, it definitely seems like something much bigger. There's actually some further commentary on the two houses kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So we hear, for example, of the cool upper chamber of Eglon in Judges 3:20, and of the heated winter house in the palace precinct of Jerusalem in Jeremiah 36:22. But it is not certain here in Amos whether house merely means room with a larger building. In any case, the only ancient Near Eastern text known so far, besides our Amos passage, which mentions summer house and winter house side by side, clearly refers to two different buildings. In his building inscription from the latter half of the 8th century BCE, King Barakib of Samal stresses that his fathers did not have a good house because the one they used had to serve both as the winter house and the summer house. The building to which this dedicatory inscription refers, quote, was apparently meant to remedy the drawback that the kings of Samal had only one palace to serve as both their summer and winter quarters. According to this, then the designation winter house and summer house meant houses differently situated, erected for appropriate seasonal use. Yeah.
As a J dollar sign
First
says,
world
first world
problems.
problems in the old world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
They were like,
Well put.
this is horrible. I only have my one house for both for 2 seasons. Oh, no.
So that's the end of chapter 3. Now I'm going to read chapter 4, but chapter 4 in Alter's translation is significantly better than chapter 4 in the KJV.
What else is new?
Like, to the point where I'm going to read Alter's version.
Oh,
because
shit.
Whoa.
it's like...
That's so anti-KJV onlyness, that fake thing you've been pervading this whole time.
You know, best version ever of any book.
Hold on. I want to see it. I want to see the KJV and how bad this one is specifically.
It's so bad that
that you almost knocked that
Destroy
over.
the mic, yeah.
You almost destroyed everything.
knocking over this mic would not destroy it. It's
It'd be an
made of
inconvenience.
metal.
Yeah.
You're gonna destroy it easily.
Yeah. No, but you
That's
can
pretty
see-
bad.
Yeah, it's
Said so on the
pretty-
container, destroyed by small falls.
It's just written poorly.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read Alter's version for chapter 4. Listen to this word, you cows of Bashan who are on Mount Samaria, who exploit the poor, who crush the needy, who say to their husbands, bring that we may drink.
And apparently, so it is quite uncertain whether the metaphorical designation cows of Bashan is meant chiefly to have a catchy effect on its hearers, such as the effect intended by the resumption of the catchword to rescue in 3:12, or the repetition of, so it does, we don't know if it's supposed to be catchy. Equally uncertain is the opinion that Amos speaks here in the professional jargon of the cattle breeder. In any case, the appositions quickly show that it is a shocking term of abuse, which is here hurled at the cultivated ladies. Bashan carries the basic meaning of fertile, stoneless plain, and it here refers to that plain in Transjordan situated on both sides of the middle and upper Yarmouk at an altitude of 500 to 600 meters, which is famous as lush pasture country.
Yeah.
And it's referenced in Jeremiah, Micah, and Deuteronomy.
So there are details about these cows of Bashan in Alter's commentary. He says, the region of Bashan was famous for its cattle.
Yeah.
But these well-fed cows are in Samaria. The prophet addresses the woman with this vitriolic epithet, not because they're fat, but because all they do is indolently satisfy their appetite, like cows grazing in a pasture. It should be noted that because Hebrew verbs are conjugated according to gender, all the verbs that follow remind us of the female identity of those excoriated. The pampered wives of Samaria are even worse than cows because they have an appetite not only for nutrients like their bovine counterparts, but for wine as well.
What's that Housewives show? The something Housewives of
The Real Housewives of X.
yeah, this would be the Real Housewives of that.
Yes, The Real Housewives of Samaria.
Yeah, that's the new show, guys.
Yep. The Master, the Lord, has sworn by his holiness that days are coming upon you when you shall be borne off in baskets, and the last of you with fish hooks.
I must protest. that altar missed a behold.
Behold!
Behold!
Behold.
We'll take it.
Behold!
So some scholars think that the baskets are used by fishermen. Others think that both are kinds of hooks. Both of these Hebrew terms only occur here.
I mean, Amos is definitely a very unique book.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's Desperate Housewives of Samaria.
Yeah. Anyways, and through the breaches, each woman shall go out straight ahead, and you shall be flung on the refuse heap, says the Lord.
Dude, Amos is savage.
Yeah, he is. He's literally saying you're going to be thrown onto a pile of shit.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty intense. Come to Bethel and trespass, to Gilgal and continue to trespass, and bring the next morning your sacrifices, and on the third day your tithes. So this verse and the next are strongly sarcastic. None of the ritual acts mentioned to be performed in the two principal cult centers of the Northern Kingdom is in itself illegitimate, but the offense is going through the steps of the ritual when the worshippers have been exploiting the poor, perverting justice, and wallowing in ill-gotten gains. Amos is not expressing a principle of opposition to the cult, but, like Isaiah after him, is objecting to the conjunction of what Isaiah calls crime and convocation of approaching the altar with hands stained with blood.
Man, I think that last section, 1 through 3, definitely should have been, sectioned off as, Amos being really mean to some women.
Yeah.
Sure, that's not nice.
Definitely not.
Yeah. Verse 5. And burn a thanksgiving offering of leavened bread, and proclaim free will offerings. Make them heard, for so have you loved, O Israelites, said the Master, the Lord.
Yeah, so this verse continues the sarcastic permission to sin by worshiping false gods. In addition to offering up sacrifices and tithes, they are instructed to also give thanksgiving bread and free will offerings. While these items are types of offerings included within the Mosaic covenant, given the context, it is perhaps best to interpret them as pagan offerings or items offered in an incorrect manner, which God hates. By the way, he hates that.
Yeah.
You gotta sacrifice properly.
Yeah, this guy hates a lot.
He really does.
And I, on my part, have given you cleanness of teeth in all your towns and want of bread in all your places, but you did not come back to me, said the Lord.
Well, wouldn't it be because you brush your teeth and use it, floss and that sort of thing? Isn't that be why you have clean teeth?
Well, that exact statement that you just made is addressed by Alter.
Oh, wow.
He says, this is an original coinage of Amos's. It is, of course, does not have anything to do with dental hygiene, but evokes a mouth in which there is no food. As want of bread in the following verse it makes clear, the line reverses the usual pattern in which the standard term appears in the first verse and a metaphorical or poetic equivalent in the second, because the prophet means to confront his audience with a small enigma at the beginning of the line that is spelled out at the end. So their teeth are clean because they haven't been eating.
Oh.
They're starving. He's giving them starvation.
Wow.
Which I guess would be a good follow-through for the cows of Bashan.
Because they're the ones that are taking it, I guess.
Yeah. And I, on my part, withheld from you the rain, with still 3 months till the harvest. And I rained on one town, but on another town did not rain. One field would have rain, but the other field without rain would dry up.
So we're talking about some drought. There's a drought going on, at least in one of them, right?
Yeah. And 2 or 3 towns would wander to a single town to drink water and would not slake their thirst.
Definitely a drought.
Yeah. But you did not turn back to me, said the Lord. So yeah, he's inflicting them with all of these horrible things that they don't want.
Yeah.
But they're still not getting it. Idiots.
Yeah, so when set alongside the highly polished oracle of verses 4 through 5, how is the continuation to be evaluated? On the whole, this is on 4, 6 through 11. On the whole, a uniform sentence structure is sustained throughout verses 6 through 11. The oracle formula at the end of verses 6, 8, 9, and 10, and 11 initially divides the material into 5 sections. That this arrangement is appropriate to the content as shown by the sentence which precedes the oracle formula in each case. Still, you did not return to me. So yeah, tell me once you get... tell me once you are done with verse 11.
Okay. I struck you with blight and with mildew. Ruins were your gardens and your vineyards, and your fig trees and your olive trees the locusts devoured. But you did not turn back to me, said the Lord. I let loose the pestilence against you as in Egypt. I slew your young men by the sword with your captured horses, and made your camp stench rise in your very nostrils. But you did not turn back to me, said the Lord. I overthrew you, as God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah, and you became like a brand saved from burning. But you did not turn back to me, said the Lord. That's the end of verse 11.
Tisk, 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 tisk.
Yeah, so there is, I think, some pretty good commentary here from Wolf on this. So he notes how different it is to the structure, to the oracles that we saw earlier on. It's a lot stricter in tone. Is what he's basically getting at. So thus the style in verses 6 through 11 deviates in many respects from that of comparable oracles of Amos, even with their secondary reworking, and no attempt at reducing the length of the oracles in verses 6 through 11 can erase this well-founded impression. Moreover, the linking of our pericope with the preceding reproach in 4 through 5 by means of even though I is striking, because both the participle as a device for connecting oracles and the first person pronoun are otherwise foreign to the book of Amos. That's that specific form of that first person pronoun. Outside of Amos, I don't know what phrase that is, but it is, even though I. That's what that is. Outside of Amos, even though I is often used in prophetic oracles to attach to an element of accusation and the corresponding threat of appropriate punishment. In contrast here, the participle introduces reminiscences of events which occurred well before the contemporary accusation, and thus we must understand it to be a secondary linking device, as it frequently is elsewhere. We never find authentic oracles of Amos joined in this fashion. What then is the derivation of our stylistically unusual pericope? And this is where he starts this investigation here. It's not like too long, actually. It's mostly just... I don't know. There's a lot of Hebrew that I can't read, but he draws parallels to different chapters. And some of them we've definitely covered a lot of. So yeah, let us turn first to an investigation of its linguistic features, a comparison of our text with enumerations of plagues in ancient Near Eastern and other Old Testament texts, brings to light especially close points of contact between Amos 4, 6 through 11 and the announcements of reward and punishment at the end of the Holiness Code in Leviticus 26. Likewise, in this chapter, as in the whole of the Holiness Code, in contrast to Amos and to the language of Deuteronomy, the form I, with reference to Yahweh, is current. Above all, however, all the plagues which Amos 4, 6 through 11 enumerates are referred to here in substance, with even the same terminology being employed to a large extent. A similar situation obtains with reference to both the curses of Deuteronomy 28 and the royal intercessory prayer of Solomon in 1 Kings 8. So
before you...
there's really not much else to say on it, but there is this whole section where it lines up hunger, drought, crop failure, locusts, pestilence, sword, and an overthrow at the end. So though, like, a lot of the word choices are very similar. A lot of the ideas that portrayed are the same. And Well, I guess they are pretty out of order.
Now,
those, but yeah.
Do either of those commentaries have anything to say about the wording of this verse in particular? Because it sounds strange. Pay attention to this. This is Yahweh speaking, right?
Okay, what verse?
Verse 11.
Verse 11. Okay.
All right. This is Yahweh speaking. So pay attention to how he says this. I overthrew you as God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. Right?
I see. Okay.
Weird.
Yeah. It doesn't make sense for him to do that because he would be referring to himself.
The expression "as God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah" occurs verbatim in Isaiah 13 and Jeremiah 50, and nearly verbatim in Jeremiah 49 and Deuteronomy 29, but it is not found at all in Leviticus and in Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28, or 1 Kings. Is one to understand this on the basis of the specific historical setting of our pericope. In addition to this correspondence in details, Amos 4:6-11 is related to Leviticus 26 in several other ways. The classical triad of plagues, hunger, sword, and pestilence is developed extensively in both and expanded in several ways. Man, I really do want to talk more about that expression. Other than it occurs verbatim.
It occurs verbatim in other places, but here it's very strange because it implies someone other than Yahweh doing that, which I would not expect here.
Not in this text.
Right, exactly. So I'm gonna check this one. And Altar really doesn't have anything on it?
Altar says nothing other than that it's a reference to Genesis 19.
Okay, great. So helpful. So the phrase "like God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah" sounds awkward, as it has Yahweh referring to himself in the third person. Some translations simply change God to I, while others retain the third person. Interestingly, this exact phrase also occurs in Isaiah and in Jeremiah, which raises the possibility that this was a well-known and commonly used phrase. This proposal eliminates the problem of Yahweh awkwardly referring to himself in the third person.
So it's a meme.
Instead, he is using a common saying of the time. That is her that is her understanding that it was a meme.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
Think of memes?
Not super helpful in this context, but okay.
No, it's not helpful.
So the next verse?
Yeah, next verse. Verse 12. Therefore, this will I do to you, Israel, because this will I do to you. Prepare to meet your God, O Israel. For look, he fashions the mountains and creates the wind.
Wait. That's another altar thing. There's a behold there.
Oh, behold!
Behold!
Yes. For look, he fashions the mountains and creates the wind, and tells man what is his thought, turns dawn into darkness, and treads on the earth's high places. The Lord God of armies is his name. And that is the end of today's readings.
Yeah, you know what? And they weren't half bad.
Oh, the formulaic aspect of the first chapter and a half is all right, but they kind of tie it together with the aside that they do when they reach Israel.
Right.
I don't know, not too much to say about Amos here. It's your fairly standard prophetic stuff we've been reading for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I am so far, at least I am enjoying Amos.
Yeah.
It's definitely not bad, and I think that the scholarship behind it. There was so much we spent like the first half hour of the show talking about it, because it's mostly people debating on which part was added in when. So it is quite it's quite dense as a subject, I think. So, I don't know. Maybe at some point I'll do a video about
a deep dive
into
the composition.
That would be a good thing. And, if you did a video, those that became patrons could get access to the script.
You're right.
Yes,
if
they
you
could.
if you are a patron at all, or I guess of $1 or more, right?
Yeah. If you donate 50 cents, you don't get this.
Yeah, unfortunately. So if you are a $1 patron or more, you get access to all of our video scripts.
Yeah, and if you donate $50 a month, you can be on the show like Landon is.
Yeah, you could be like Landon. And you know what?
If you donate $10 or more, you could be at a monthly drawing for a cool T-shirt like this. Helium is risen.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And if you don't want to be entered into the drawing, you can purchase merchandise that will be pinned right now.
See, because we do have a person who has the ability to pin shirts sometimes. So there you go.
Yes, you can get that exact T-shirt, the He Is Risen one.
And people look at this and they think, and then they think a bit more, and they're not quite sure. And you can see the cognitive
dissonance
thingies cycling.
You can see them thinking.
Yeah. So next week, we will be finishing Amos.
Yeah. It's going to be a little long, but you know what we talked about?
Most of the stuff
we talked about most of the stuff.
We did a good intro today.
Yeah.
So next week, if you need a good intro, watch today's episode.
But we're also going to be continuing with the Apocalypse of Abraham on Friday.
Yeah, that is accurate because we are in the Apocalypse of Abraham. Yeah. So make sure to catch all that. And you know what? Hey, if you haven't already, drop a like, subscribe if you haven't.
That thumbs up thing.
Dropping a like really does help us out a lot because YouTube likes viewer engagement. So the more viewer engagement there is on a video, the more likely it is to show up in recommended feeds.
You know, we also, if you want to help us in a different way, we have an Amazon wish list.
We do.
Full of books. You
can
check out the books. You can buy us books.
Yeah, you can add books to this table. You can give us books for sources that we will use in more long-form videos.
Read them, and we'll explain to you all the good parts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Gonna give you the good stuff. No need to sit through all that Greek and Hebrew. We'll give it to you.
We'll give you the relevant pieces.
Yeah.
Landon, anything you're working on that you want to share with the audience before we skedaddle?
Well, now that my move is finished and I'm now into doing house maintenance stuff, and my producer is mostly recovered from the Rona, as they say in Australia, I will be looking to start our favorite universe videos. It'll be short science videos, like 2 to 5 minute little things about science news. And those are coming, I promise. It was delayed due to the what thing, and of course there's Our Favorite Universe Discord channel where we post a number of things relating to science, relating to history, medicine, cooking, and current events.
Will you teach me how to cook?
I've done things on there where I've shown people, like, let's make some pizza, let's make some nice pasta, and I go into the kitchen and take things down and actually show stuff. So there's a lot of stuff you can do to cook, relatively simple, and it's quite yummy. So.
Oh, good.
Yeah, see, you take some linguine, you throw some olive oil, and it's like diced up garlic in there. You steam some vegetables
cheese from scratch. You don't have to take it from a box. You can actually make your own, and you can flavor things. You can do all kinds of cool
I'm
stuff.
looking forward to watching that pasteurizing process.
You can make the cheese yourself.
Yeah. But those are usually done on your channel. Our Favorite Universe is not a cooking channel. It's a science-based thing. So
science cooking.
Well, cooking takes place in the universe. So.
Yes. There you go. And that's part of why I make it a favorite. So
yeah. So I guess that's
that's all the shilling we have to do. All the links.
We have Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah, that's true. Those are free to follow. All the links are in the description, guys. So it's all down there.
Yep.
And until next time,
we will see you on Friday, and then Sunday, and then Friday.
We got some shows coming up.
And then
we're
Friday,
almost done with the Old Testament.